So Duke was going to talk about the Holy Spirit. I wonder what he was going to say. But it's going to be my objective before the end that we'll work ourselves around back to the Holy Spirit. So y'all keep track on me and see how I do. One of the things I was excited to talk about this morning is that many of you know we have one of our outreach programs, one of the ones we sponsor and try to take an active part in, is Gilda's Club. It is a wonderful organization that is over on 43rd in between Broadway and Main. I always point out that it's across from the Levy Bar and the liquor store. And everybody knows where that is. So it works out well. And last week I had an opportunity to do a 2-hour workshop with a personal hero of mine. It's my own doctor, Dr. Jane Murray. Some of you may know Jane. She's been quite a rebel. She's a medical doctor, but about 20 years ago, she saw that something was happening in the medical community that she didn't feel was really holistically serving patients. And that is that we were looking for a pill or a surgery to fix whatever it was that was causing our problems. And so what Jane went and did is she started out on her own. Whoa. That's probably Duke playing with me somewhere, wherever he's at. Anyway, she went out and started the Sastoon Center, the Center for Integrative Medicine. And 20 years ago, this was radical stuff. You had a medical doctor that was prescribing acupuncture, chiropractic, massage therapy, psychotherapy, and naturopathy. Not only that, but because she was doing all these things, she said, you know what, I'm not going to try to fight with the insurance company. I'm just not going to take insurance. Now that is a bold step for a doctor. And 20 years later, she has a thriving practice. And so it was such an honor for me that when we met with the people at Gilda's Club and we thought about what would be of greatest value that we could offer to them, people who are going through cancer treatment currently, people who are cancer survivors, people who are caregivers of people with cancer, or anyone whose life has been impacted in cancer in the myriad of ways that it happens. And so what we decided to do is that we would do a workshop to simply talk about meditation as medicine and integrative medicine as a complementary care to cancer. And so what was interesting is that I learned a lot about what's happening in the medical community here on the leading edge of how are we going to be healthy as a species. And so I gave my little talk about meditation, and I'll share a little bit of that in a minute. But what was so fascinating to me is that Jane is part of a growing movement in the medical community that is called functional medicine. Now that didn't sound really very sexy, so they decided to call it, now it's kind of being called personalized lifestyle medicine. That sounds better. But if you Google functional medicine, you'll find that there is a doctor that has gotten completely passionate about looking at people holistically in the way that you make people healthy, not simply treating the symptoms of their disease. And so she had on her chart a tree, and she said that most of our medical community today focuses on the leaves of the tree. If your leaves turn brown, you have a particular symptom that happens, they try to give you a medicine that will make those leaves green again. And sometimes if your leaves turn brown, they give you something that sort of spray paints the leaves green again. But oftentimes, they're not getting to the root of the issue of what is causing the illness or the disease in the first place. And so functional medicine is about looking at the base, our roots of what is causing our sense of healthiness or disease. And so some of the things that are included in those roots that we're looking at, there's certainly genetics involved, but there's also a host of other things that we have control over. We have control over what we eat. I just found out yesterday, everybody knows who Hippocrates is. He was like a bajillion years ago. He was one of the first medicine doctor-ish kind of people. Was he Greek? Okay, Greek. Hippocrates. As a child, I always thought it was Hippocrates, but that's not right. Hippocrates actually said, he's quoted as saying that food is medicine and medicine is food. So it's very rare these days that a doctor would give us a prescription for food as a treatment for whatever our illness might be. But in fact, we know that what we eat has a tremendous impact on how we feel and whether or not we get sick. So another component of functional medicine is rest and relaxation. Many of you have heard the studies that say that if you don't get enough sleep, that has a myriad of issues that floats through your entire immune system, your body, your mind, your sense of well-being. And so, have you ever had a doctor prescribe more sleep? Can you imagine a little prescription pad? It would be in illegible handwriting, and it would say, "Get more sleep." But they know that when people start to focus on these things, like what they're eating, how much sleep they're getting, we'll talk about meditation in a minute, but also what's happening psychologically and what is happening spiritually. So there's research that shows that people who have a spiritual path have a higher immune system, that something about spirituality and having a spiritual community improves your immune system that is quantifiable. So it's interesting to me when we're going to talk about the Holy Spirit that there is some spirit within us when our spirit feels nourished, that our body is well. And so it is this idea of thinking of ourselves as a holistic being, of what we might do in order to not think about curing a disease, but actually preventing it and living a healthy life. And what makes this all so fascinating is the reason that we are all sitting here in this room, in this moment, is a woman named Myrtle Fillmore. Myrtle Fillmore in the 1880s was sick, and she was willing to try anything in order to get well. And at that time, they didn't have the plethora of pills that they could give you. They basically told her to go home and get her affairs in order because most likely she only had about 6 months to live. And so it's often in that time when we feel most panicked, frustrated, and in the moment of crisis that we truly believe we'll try anything in order to stay alive. And that's where Myrtle was 120 years ago. And she went to hear a man speak who said, "You are a child of God, and therefore you do not inherit illness." And this was a radical idea back then. She went back and she actually began to sit in the silence for 2 years. She talked to each of her organs in her body and asked them for forgiveness because she had negatively imagined that they were working against her. And so here was Myrtle Fillmore 120 years ago, understanding the foundations of functional medicine, that if she was truly going to be healthy and whole, that she needed to look at her spiritual life. She needed to look at what she was doing with regards to meditation and psychological, how she was empowering herself to have a sense of well-being. And so how fortunate we are that we're sitting here today as a result of a woman from the Midwest who was willing to be a rebel and say there must be another way of living. And that's what started this whole thing. And in fact, I love this fun fact about Unity, that they had a vegetarian restaurant in the 1920s in downtown Kansas City. How radical was that? They even had a little car that drove around, and I guess Kansas City in the 20s was hustling and bustling, and you had, financial people and banks and all that good stuff going on. And these guys would get in this little car that they drove around and go off and have a vegetarian meal, thanks to Unity Temple. So one of the things that we think that might be so radical today, like, oh my gosh, we might think about how we could eat organic food or how we could eat healthy or however we could improve our diet. This was actually something that the Fillmores were thinking about over 100 years ago. So maybe it's not such a radical idea after all, that food is medicine and medicine is food. And so what I wanted to end with today was this idea of meditation. And I call myself the Johnny Appleseed of meditation. I am passionate about it to the point of being kind of an evangelist. I'm so sorry. I apologize in advance for my enthusiasm. But what I have found is that people really are transformed by this simple practice. And over the last 6 years, Duke and I have had a meditation program. We meditate here for 30 minutes at 12:10 and 5:30, 365 days a year in the Myrtle Fillmore Chapel. There's a little picture of Myrtle Fillmore behind me over my head in that chapel as we're meditating every day. I kind of feel like Myrtle's kind of there. If she was here, she'd be going, rock on. Yes, somebody got it. And so what yes. Maybe that's a reincarnation of Myrtle Fillmore. One never knows. And so in the last 6 years, I've been teaching meditation for 10 years, and I can tell you, I have heard every excuse in the book about why people can't meditate. In fact, it's entertaining at a cocktail party when I tell, you're always, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? I teach meditation, I like to tell people, and then look at their experience. And some people are very fascinated. Oh, I want to get the details. What do you do? And some people are like, I got to go get another cocktail. That's really nice, though. It is weird that people are afraid of meditation. And one of the things I found out is the reason is that, first of all, it is kind of a scary thought in our culture to just sit quietly and do nothing. You're obviously lazy. You're not being productive. Is there nothing you can find to do other than to sit in the silence? And so there's this idea in our culture that it's not good to do, and yet it does so much good for us. And it's scary to be with your thoughts. One of the other things that I've heard time and time again is people just swoosh me away with a wave of their hand and go, oh, I tried that meditation thing. I can't stop thinking. And but as they're running away back to the appetizer table, but wait, you don't have to stop thinking. That's not part of it. It is the opportunity to just simply be with whatever arises. We have thoughts, emotions, we have sensations, there's sounds all around us. And we can actually incorporate that into the meditative experience. And that's what makes it so powerful, is that we're not trying to push our thoughts away, but we're actually trying to be aware of them and to just simply let them be. The other thing is people always think you have to sit in the pretzel position. When I say the word meditation, they've got an idea of some old Indian guy sitting in the lotus position with his head behind legs behind his head. And I'm here to tell you that you are just as likely to get enlightened when you meditate in a chair. Maybe more so because you're not in so much pain. And people think that they have to meditate a long time. And what I have found is that the majority of people who are able to create a successful meditation program are the ones that start off with bite-sized pieces. And so what I wanted to end with you today, we're going to do a little meditation, but before I do that, I really want to give you a little tiny baby step assignment. And that's what I call 5 minutes and 5 moments. You don't have to find those 5 minutes right when you first get up in the morning. Find 5 minutes in your day to do absolutely nothing. It might be when you're sitting in your car and you haven't put the key in the ignition. It might be when you go for a walk in the middle of the day. When I worked in the corporate world, I would go to the restroom and found that to be the most quiet place in the world to meditate. I was talking about this at a company out in corporate woods, and a young mother told me that she had found these ways to do this. And one of her 5 moments that she found is she would put her young son in the car seat and she would buckle him in. She knew he was safe, and she would shut the door. And if you've ever been around young children, that little moment and that piece of glass in between you, that's a wonderful thing. So just think about, where could you find 5 minutes to do absolutely nothing? And the next is 5 moments. And this really helps if you do it the night before. If you think about, where could I find 5 moments in my day where I decide I'm going to take some deep breaths and be fully present? It could be as easy as, did everybody get out of bed this morning? You're here. I assume that's true. I suspect that when you got out of bed, there was a point at which you put your feet on the floor. How many people remember that moment that you put your feet on the floor? Extra credit. I have to tell you, for me, sometimes I get out of bed, I go to the bathroom, I meant to be mindful, I really wasn't, so I have to get back in bed, and I have to put my feet back on the floor. And you have as many do-overs as you want. I put my feet back on the floor, I say, okay, this counts as one. You might find a moment at a stoplight, or the most advanced training I can tell you with meditation is that when you are at the grocery store, I encourage you to pick the longest line and the worst cashier. This can be one of my moments. I'm going to stand in line and just take it all in. Nobody's expecting anything of you but to slowly shuffle your feet forward until it's your turn. So 5 minutes and 5 moments. And if you commit yourself to the day before, tomorrow, here's the 5 moments I'm going to find. I find that we're more likely to do it. So it can simply be that simple. And what Myrtle found was simply being silent was where she was able to connect to spirit. And so, I'm sure that's exactly what Duke was going to say today. That Holy Spirit that is innate within each and every one of us is a whole lot easier to find when we are sitting in the silence and simply being present. So let's take those thoughts into meditation. Ourselves this precious time to sit in the silence. I encourage you to just sort of straighten your back a bit. Loosen up those shoulders and your head. And just take some slow, full, deep breaths. Breathing in, counting to 4. And breathing out, counting to 6. And then simply allow the breath to find its natural rhythm. Focus awareness on all the minute sensations of breathing in and breathing out. It's normal that thoughts and feelings arise. And you'll hear sounds and feel other sensations. And we actually incorporate them all into the meditative process by just imagining each one to be like a cloud floating by in the sky. Not trying to hang on to any particular thought or feeling. Not trying to push anything away. We are practicing finding that balance of simply being aware, as if they were all just clouds floating by in the sky. While we continue to focus on the sensation of breathing in and breathing out. Simply allowing ourselves to sit in the silence and allow that innate and abundant connection to the Holy Spirit that will just naturally arise. That we can connect to that innate wisdom and compassion that is within each and every one of us by simply sitting in the silence.
As we leave the silence behind, we know that we take with us that connection to the Spirit, and can know that sense of wholeness and wellness that is there within each and every one. And so it is.